Holiday hunger.
Well, yeah, we've been talking about this morning. Lots of response to our piece. The Labour MP Frank Field wants to place a legal duty on local councils to provide free meals and fun for children who would otherwise go without during the summer holidays. He wants the government to foot the bill, which would be around £40 million, with a tax on sugary drinks. Well, Conservative MP Jacob Rees Mogg is one of more than 100 MPs backing this bill. Good morning.
Good morning, good morning.
Families facing poverty in the school holidays. There's been a very strong response from our audience this morning to the audio that I hope you heard just there of the mother saying, well, I cut down on the number of cigarettes I smoke, I kind of adjust the sort of sweets I'm buying for my child. People getting in touch with us saying, look, if a mother can afford to smoke, if she's buying sweets for her child, this isn't poverty. She can pay for their own lunch. Where do you stand?
I think there are judgments made as to whether people are eligible for free school meals or not, and that what Frank Field is talking about is helping those children who the state has said need help with meals during the term time, but there's obviously a gap during the holidays. It's very difficult to judge how people spend their money. Some people will have different priorities from others and will sacrifice one thing for another. And I think to criticise people for having small pleasures is very difficult.
Do you believe there are families out there who need state help to feed their children in the school holidays? Have you come across these families yourself?
I haven't come across this in North East Somerset. I'm just looking at it from the point of view of the state's estimate of need, that free school meals exist to help families with children at school who would be stretched to have to pay for it. I think poverty becomes a very misleading term because we think of absolute poverty and people living in other countries who find it very difficult even to feed themselves. In this country, there isn't that type of poverty. There is relative poverty and people able to do less than others. And that it is important to ensure that within the systems that we have, priority is given to ensuring children are fed.
Do you believe that this should be paid for by a tax on sugary drinks?
Well, where I think Frank Field has been very clever, and he is an extremely able man and one of the most respected figures in welfare, is to work out where the funding for his scheme should come from. And he has said the money should come from a tax the government has already introduced. As it happens, it's a tax I think was a rotten idea, but that's a separate matter. The tax is there, it's providing revenue, and for Frank Field to say, well, why don't we use some of this revenue that is intended to improve children's health directly to feed children, seems to me a good use of a bad tax.
And there isn't a role for families out there. You don't believe that perhaps these families individually should be looking at their own finances and taking responsibility, I suppose?
Of course there's a role for families. And there's a role for people taking responsibility for themselves. And I very much believe in a welfare system that helps those who genuinely need rather than a universal principle. But there are people who do need some help, and even if they take responsibility, find things very difficult. And I think it's sensible to be supportive of them.
Can I get a couple of quick thoughts on a couple of important political stories in terms of Brexit negotiations, how they're progressing, and discussion around the divorce bill at the moment? Michel Barnier coming out and saying that an element of this negotiation was teaching the UK a lesson, effectively, in imposing this significant bill on this country. How do you think the UK is best placed to approach negotiations on this?
Well, we now see the tone that Mr Barnier wants to follow. We need re-education. We've got to go off some re-education camp, like Maoist China. I think that was a very unfortunate choice of words with difficult connotations. But it's just a reminder that we have to go into these negotiations with a titanium-plated backbone. There can't be any mucking about. The legal position is that we don't owe them any money at all. That's an international EU and UK law. We may want to make a contribution, but our starting point is zero, and it would be incredibly unwise for us to pay any money before we see what the other side of the deal is.
And Theresa May has shown that kind of titanium-plated backbone that you described by talking about staying in charge of the party and leading it into the next election. Were you pleased, relieved, or were you perhaps worried that that might impact on your own leadership ambitions, if indeed you have any? There's been lots of chatter about that over the summer holidays.
It has, and it'll be jolly fun in August, but now we're in September and we've got to be slightly more serious about life. No, I don't. I want to serve the Tory party, and I'm interested in the development of ideas within the Tory party, but I fully support Mrs May. I was very pleased that she clarified the position after there'd been a bit of...
Have you ever thought about it yourself? Ever thought about it?
I'm not a realistic candidate. I'm not in the cabinet. I'm backbench MP.
Can you conceive of no circumstances?
That's what Michael Heseltine said. The problem is, any form of word I choose, people don't believe what I say. So what I want to do is be the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset.
Oh, the line's gone. Well, I think he was clear enough on that.
He was, yeah.
To Jacob Rees Mogg, Conservative MP.